Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers, where we are going through the complete A to Z of PS2 Hidden Gems, looking for games that don't get talked about as much as they probably deserve, or some that you might just not know about. Remember, that's a total of 270 games I'm including in this series, and the PS2 has literally thousands to wade through, so forgive me if I include some that you've heard of before or just don't like. But hey, how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games, starting with the letter J.
So I live in this post-pulse world.
First up is Jacked, a motorbike racing combat game. There isn't really anything in the way of story here, other than you're a racer taking part in the Jacked tournament thing that takes place all over America. You start out with a single level to race on and just one bike to choose, but by completing races you open up new tracks as well as a whole ton of bikes to play around with, each with the usual stats that you'd expect. Each track you race on has a handful of different events. You have your standard race, which is generally you against about 5 other people. This is a simple 3-lap affair. But it's not easy. The computer AI is pretty damn tough, and it will take you a few tries even to beat the first stage. But when you get used to how it all works, it does fall into place. As this is a combat racer, you have a few attacks you can do. You can punch left and right, which will stun or knock opponents off their bikes. Hitting people also fills up your nitro, just like in real life. You'll also see icons on the tracks. These are either more nitro or one of a few weapons. In races you get baseball bats, wooden planks, a pipe wrench. These all have better reach and power than your punch, so you'll want to grab one. But it can be hard to hit people though, thanks to the high speeds and also the slow attack animation. There is a cool mechanic though. If you hit someone and stun them, you then have a few seconds where you can jump from your bike onto their bike and steal it. This unlocks new ones for you to ride, which is a really cool way to do it. Once you've jumped on, you get a boost, and you have to make sure that you don't crash before that boost timer runs out, otherwise you lose the bike, and I quite like this mechanic. Other game modes include a gang mode, where you and your team of bike riders, which are distinguished with coloured arrows above them, have to get a flag and hold onto it through the bunch of checkpoints. Every checkpoint that you pass while holding the flag gives you a point. First to a certain number of points wins. This mode also has a few extra weapons, mainly the grenade, which you can use to throw and take out multiple enemies at once. They'll all be after you as well, to get the flag from you. And then there's a number of time trials and even an elimination mode, where you have to take out a certain number of racers before the laps are done. It really does quite a good job of mixing things up. Graphically, the game is decent, as a lot of racing games tend to be. There's a fair bit of detail and the tracks are pretty varied, and they even have a ton of traffic on them, which makes things even harder. The controls can take a bit to get used to. It's really hard to get used to at first, thanks to the drifty turning. You really need to learn to use the brakes here, otherwise you'll just crash into everything and you won't last 5 minutes. Thankfully, the different bikes really do offer better handling, and you'll soon find one that you like. It took me a while to get past the first level, but once I did and I found my stride, I really had some fun. I had a quick look at a couple of reviews and saw that this was getting really awful write-ups, but honestly I don't really see why. Yeah, it's not a perfect game, and it is much harder than it needs to be, but I enjoyed it once I was used to how it all worked, and I've definitely played a hell of a lot worse. It is a pretty cheap game these days, so I would recommend giving it a go if you like racing games. Jackie Chan Adventures is a 3D platform game based on the cartoon that I've never seen, but I'm sure it's great. The game sees you take control of Jackie, who is something of a treasure hunter now, living with his uncle and niece. Your uncle gives you a tip-off about a bunch of treasures in a few places across the world, so you get your exploring gear on and go out to find them. You won't believe it, but you aren't the only one looking for the treasure, and soon come up against some evil treasure hunters who want to take the stuff for their own fame, fortune, maybe even magical powers. The game is split into various levels, which is a mixture of action-packed stages where you need to explore various caves, temples and other places where you do a dodgy Tomb Raider bit of gameplay. Jackie can run, jump and climb all over the place, and you'll need to figure out simple puzzles in the temples in order to open doors, deactivate traps, or make other odd things happen around the level. These are mostly block-pushing puzzles or fire-based things and are never too complex. The game is clearly aimed at younger audiences. There's also enemies all over the place for you to fight, and being Jackie Chan, you can do all sorts of kung fu and have a decent number of combos at your disposal. The fighting isn't complex, and it just does come down to mashing a few buttons, but it does work. However, it is kind of clunky. You really have to learn to position yourself properly when fighting, and it's one of those games where you have to finish your animation before starting anything else. When you're not tracking down treasure, you spend the rest of your time in towns and bases where you can talk to the locals to find clues and even have to complete tasks for them to get other clues as to where the treasures you're after are. These usually involve doing mini-games like rhythm things or simple wrestling games. It's actually quite a nice little way to mix things up. I have to say, I really like the variety of places you visit on the adventure. Each of the treasures or talismans that you come across gives you a new ability, like being able to run faster, double jump and so on. You can use one of these abilities at a time and it's easy to swap between them. You'll often need to swap between a few of the abilities to solve a number of the puzzles, and while they never got too crazy, some will take a few tries to figure out. Something that really deserves a shout out are the graphics, which are really pretty good. They're cel shaded and hold up very well still. The levels in particular look great, but the character models are also very good, though some of the animation is a bit basic. Something that's not great though is Jackie Chan's voice acting, which is just terrible and possibly a bit racist. It's not actually voiced by Jackie Chan himself, and I have no idea what sort of accent they were going for, but it ain't Jackie Chan, that's for sure. Still, this is a fun little adventure game. Again, it's not perfect, with the combat probably being the worst thing about the gameplay, but it's definitely not a terrible game, and some of the temples are fun to explore. Check this one out, especially if you've got a younger person to play the game with you. Sort of fighting game time now with Jojo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind. This is another game based on a cartoon that I have never seen and probably never will, but I can confirm that it is indeed bizarre. There is a quite confusing story here that probably does make more sense if you know the show, but you're a bloke called Giorno, at least at the start of the game you are. And you, along with a bunch of other characters in the game, have things called stands, which are like spirit things inside them which all have their own abilities. Jojo's one, for example, can grow trees. Another one allows the user to shrink, one can go between a shadow world and the real world, one's like a toy plane thing. I mean, I don't really understand it, but I kinda like it. Anyway, the game's story sees you meeting all sorts of characters with crazy stands, and you'll need to fight them in one-on-one 3D arena battles. The fights are not your usual 3D fighter style though, and there's no crazy combos or things like that, but you do have a few attacks that you can use. Characters can run around, and almost every button on the controller is a different attack. Some are regular punches and kicks, whereas the shoulder buttons are attacks for your stand. You can use these as much as you like, and you'll need to figure out the best time to use certain moves. What's interesting is that each fight has a puzzle element to it. Most enemies have weaknesses that you don't need to exploit, but if you can figure them out, you'll do massive damage and can end the fights really fast. For example, there's an enemy who basically lives in shadows, so if you can trick him into somewhere in the light, he'll take loads of damage. Equally, the annoying twat that can shrink himself can be really hard to track down as he's so small, but there's cars in the levels, so if you blow up a vehicle and manage to do one that's close to him, he'll take the massive damage. Levels do tend to have about 5 or 6 secrets in them as well, some of which aren't actually even attacks. You might just find something in the level that gives you a clue as to what you need to do to win. At the end of the level, you're told how many secrets you've found, and you can replay levels whenever you want to try and beat them faster or find the secrets and improve your overall rank. As you progress through the story, you take control of a load of other characters, which is always fun. I actually like being forced to play as a bunch of different freaks. This is a really cool mechanic, and it's something I'd like to see in other games. The actual combat is tough though. The animations are slow and you've got to wait for animations to finish. You're left open to attack all the time if you miss with yours. Also, if you're running, you tend to do shoulder attacks which usually miss, and it really takes a while to get used to. It will likely take a few tries to get past a lot of the levels while you figure out the secrets and learn the new characters' moves and abilities. In fact, I'd probably go as far as to say that the combat isn't really all that good, but I loved seeing all the crazy characters and the story is sort of weird and I'm into it. Also, the graphics are superb. It's another cel-shaded game and it really looks great with some excellent animation and locations. If you can handle some simple but tough and often frustrating fighting, then I would recommend giving this a go. There are other, frankly better, Jojo games on the PS2, but this is the one that I'd never seen anywhere, so wanted to include it. Time for something fishy. It's Jaws Unleashed. And you know what? I've just realised that most of the games in this video are licensed ones. Great. There's a surprising amount of Jaws games out there if you go digging, but the PS2 one is definitely the best one that I've played. Instead of being stupid humans, here you're the angry shark, and after a short tutorial on how to eat people, you're captured and put in a SeaWorld-like place. As you're disgruntled and a hungry shark, your mission is to burst out of the complex and eat as many men, women, children and other forms of wildlife as you can. Also, the story sees the mayor of town trying to figure out how to get rid of you, as well as revealing some nefarious governmental style evil doings and corruption, which just so happen to take place in the places where you might be able to eat him. I'll let you figure out how that all goes. But the game itself is played over a bunch of levels that have a load of different objectives, and the whole game is played very tongue-in-cheek, which is really for the best. There is a definite sense of humour here, and actually works surprisingly well. You swim through a bunch of locations that are packed with obstacles, humans and other aquatic beasts, and you're given objectives, which are things like eating people, sinking boats, or even smashing docks and piers. Being a shark, you have a few ways to attack and defend yourself. You can of course bite things. Holding the bite button keeps smaller things in your mouth, which you can then shake around, making limbs fall off and so on. This is great to do to the pesky humans, and works well on smaller creatures as well. You also have a charge attack. This is used to stun enemies as well as boats. You can knock people off the boats and into the water, and as you upgrade your attacks and abilities, this can be used to sink ships as well as destroy certain walls or windows, and even wooden panels that hold up structures. You'll be doing that a lot. You also have a tail swipe, which is kind of hard to use but powerful. This is also to knock people off of boats or to smash cages which have divers in and things like that. I did find that I didn't use the tail whip too often though, unless I really had to. As you explore the pretty large levels, you also find collectibles. These are mainly for points, which are used to upgrade your abilities, and before too long, you're put in a hub world on the island, where you have access to side missions as well as the next story mission. This hub world is a great way to practice your moves, as some can be tough to do, like when you need to speed onto a beach to eat unsuspecting sunbathers. Then you've got to waggle yourself back into the sea, and the timing can be a bit tricky. The side missions are usually essentially timed challenges, like eating a certain amount of people in a time limit or smashing stuff in a time limit, but they are fun and a great way to upgrade your stats. There's a surprising amount of enemies here as well. Obviously most of the island is out to kill you, so there's people on boats with guns, there's divers with harpoons, small submarines that are there to take you down, and that's just the humans. You also have to contend with other sharks, dolphins, killer whales and more. As the saying goes, there's plenty more fish in the sea, and a lot of them here are much bigger than you. Thankfully, you do get bigger as the game progresses, and eventually you'll be able to eat whatever the hell you want without too much hassle. The game looks surprisingly good here. Jaws looks great and animates well, as do most of the underwater animals. The humans are all pretty small and not particularly impressive, but that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that the actual attacks are cool looking, with loads of blood and body parts going all over the place. And that's the thing with this one, it's just good, mindless fun to play. Some of the missions are a bit repetitive, and there's definitely some dodgy gameplay designs. Some enemies can be a real pain in the ass as well, and you'll find that you'll die really quickly at times with little to no warning, often putting you way back to an earlier checkpoint. This is also a game that I recommend watching the cutscenes for, partly because they're hilariously bad, and also because they give you a better idea of where you need to go by doing this. There isn't a huge amount of direction in the levels, though other than the hub world, they are quite linear. But yeah, I had a lot of fun playing this one, and would definitely recommend adding it to the collection. Sticking with the water theme, here is Jet X20, or probably X2O. It's a water ski racing game where you choose from a bunch of riders filled with the usual generic 2000s tude, and you choose from a few jet skis with the usual stat differences, and then you choose to do a single race, a trick attack, a cup or a championship. Standard racing stuff. The variety in tracks is good here, and you'll be in lakes, forests, oceanic vistas, waterways through cities and more. Each of the tracks is also pretty large. There aren't laps, instead you're going downhill and have to reach the bottom, and they'll take a good 5 or so minutes to get through. On your way down you'll see gates that you can go through to get a boost. There's different coloured ones, each one giving you a different amount of boost. Often these are placed in a way that if you're good enough, you can go through a bunch of them in one go, giving yourself a really good boost bonus. There's also ramps on the tracks, as well as areas which just have big drops. When you see these, you can do a load of cool tricks off them using various button combinations. The tricks are all pretty easy to pull off, but you do have to keep in mind that you do need to be completely back on your jet ski before landing it if you don't want to fall off. So this isn't a game where you want to risk holding a trick till the last minute, you want to take it easy. Completing a trick gives you points as well as a boost bonus. If you fall off your jet ski, it can take a while to get back on and you'll most likely lose a few positions. And believe me, you don't want to do this, as catching up with the other racers can be bloody difficult. They rarely make mistakes, and I found it hard to come in the top 3, but it's not impossible. You really will need to learn the courses though, so don't expect to win on your first try. Completing the various cups and championships unlocks more riders and better jet skis, and you'll want these as the starting ones are pretty crappy to control. It definitely gets easier the more you play though. It looks good with some real SSX vibes for character designs, tricks and courses. You could even be forgiven for thinking that it takes place in the same universe, but it doesn't, so don't think that. And that's all there is to it really. It's a kind of standard racing game, but it is good fun, but very difficult, but when you're used to it, it's not too bad. Here is Johnny Bravo, Date-a-rama. Yep, another game based on a cartoon license, and yeah, it probably shouldn't be in this video, but I love Johnny Bravo, so deal with it. As you can probably guess, this is a mini-game compilation game where Johnny has made it onto a TV dating show, where you've got to compete against another hunk for the affections of a sexy woman, which is exactly the sort of thing that probably would happen in a Johnny Bravo cartoon. Which, by the way, is a cartoon that would never be made these days, and if you haven't seen it before, or in a while, go back and watch it. It is pure filth, and it was shown as a kids show. It's great. Anyway, it's a pretty damn simple game. The game automatically spins a wheel to randomly select something for you to play. Then you compete against a whopping one other person in the minigame, and the winner gets to move up the stair on the staircase. First one to the top of the stairs gets to bang the woman, or that's what I'm guessing happens. So yeah, the main bulk of the game are the minigames. Man, I've said game too many times in this one. These come in a few flavours, and while they all play and function fine, none are exactly great. You've got one where you have to bash buttons to lift weights, there's one where you've got to time button presses to hit a strength meter thing, one where you've got a vacuum and you have to suck up mice of your colour, one where you've got to run around a garden picking flowers, and there's a food fight one, and a few others in there as well. The thing is, I haven't even managed to see them all yet, because the random game picker keeps picking the same ones over and over again. Which is good, because it meant I knew what I had to do to win, but the fact that there's only about 10 different games and you don't even get to play them all in a single playthrough is a little bit crap. Which is probably a good way to describe this game. Now, technically the game works fine, and the minigames do function, it's just that they're not very interesting, and they go on for a bit too long. Between the games you've got an annoying announcer that's not funny at all, and of course won't shut up. Also, when you win a game, you have the chance to gamble with it. Here, another wheel appears if you do gamble, and you've got to run the risk of either having to go back down a few steps, or you might get lucky and go up a few even more. Or you might even swap places with the second player. The choice is yours. I'd probably say not to bother gambling though, as the computer AI is pretty dumb, and it's unlikely that you'll lose when you're playing against them. Now, in this game's defence, you can tell it's a budget title, firstly because it's a game from Blast Software, but also because you can tell with the simple graphics, which are actually quite faithful to the cartoon. They're not cel-shaded, which I'm surprised at, but they actually look alright for what they are. The sound and music are basic, and you have the proper voice actors, which is good, and a few other characters from the cartoon show up. The music features the theme song, but it's a terrible loop that just randomly cuts out and restarts abruptly, and the whole thing just feels super cheap, and you can tell it was thrown together pretty quickly. So would I recommend it? No. Then why is it here? Because Johnny Bravo is awesome, and I had no idea this game existed, and actually, if you played it in 2-player, I reckon it would be a good laugh, but maybe not for the right reasons. More licenses now with Jurassic Park Operation Genesis. This is a really cool park building game where you're in charge of building and maintaining your very own Jurassic Park. Now believe it or not, I really love park building sim games, and I have done since I first played Theme Park back in the day. So here you start out by creating an island from a bunch of random presets, and once you've got the one you want to start with, you're plonked onto the island. From here you've got to do a ton of things, and I'm not going to go into crazy detail here, but I'll give you a brief overview. You start with a bit of cash, and you'll need to spend it wisely to send out teams across the world to dig sites, looking for fossils and amber. You use these to get DNA for dozens of different dinosaurs, and once you've got enough of their DNA, you can start to make the dinosaurs. So it's back to the island, where you'll need to create incubators and of course build various pens to keep the dinosaurs in. Once you've got a few, you can open your park to the public, and then see the money start to roll in, hopefully. Keeping guests happy is a big part of the game, and you'll need to make sure you've got a good variety of dinosaurs in the park, so there's something for everyone. You can mix and match dino types in the pens, and sometimes you'll want to put in big meat eaters with other big meat eaters so they have a fight, or even prey dinosaurs so they can hunt and fight and kill each other. Some park goers love this, others not so much, so it's all about having a good balance. As well as the dinosaurs though, you need to make sure there's enough paths, viewing galleries and so on around the place, so the guests get a good view. And then you need to look at these smaller details like hiring cleaners, security, building food outlets, installing benches and bins, and even toilets. It's these things that can put off your guests. The better your park, the higher your star rating. The higher your star rating, the more dig sites become available and the more dinosaurs you can find. You also get access to more upgrades and amenities that you can add to the park, like better security fences or extra attractions like gift shops to boost income. Something that is a bit annoying though is that you can only access 3 dig sites at a time, so you won't ever be able to have all the dinosaurs in your park. Of course, being wild beasts, the dinosaurs can cause you trouble as well as the annoying guests. Yep, dinosaurs will break out of their enclosures and go on rampages, eating your guests and ruining your bottom line. When this happens, you'll need to get in the chopper and head out to stop them. Sometimes you can round them up and herd them somewhere, but often you'll just need to break out the rifle and shoot the bastards in the face. It's sad, but gotta be done. There's also missions you can do, which are things like going on dinosaur hunts or even photographing them. These are accessed in a separate menu to the park building side of things and are fun little distractions. Playing the game on a PS2 works well, the controls are intuitive, and I didn't really have any issues with making my park or doing what I needed to do. My only real complaint is that you can't zoom out very far, making it hard to find where you are on the map or getting to where you need to go. Graphically though, the game looks great, considering how much it has to throw on the screen. There is a good amount of detail, and though there is a bit of slowdown here and there, it was never enough to ruin the experience. Seeing the rampages or natural disasters that occur was always fun, except when you realise you have to rebuild most of your park. Thank goodness for extra money cheats, eh? You get the classic Jurassic Park music, as well as a pretty terrible impression of most of the movie cast, and the game just works really well. I'd say this is a must-play for any Jurassic Park fan. It was also released on the Xbox and the PC, and while I'm sure the PC version is probably the best version of it, you certainly can't go wrong here. If you just want to murder dinosaurs and skip the whole park building thing, then you might want to play Jurassic The Hunted, no relation to Jurassic Park. This is a first-person shooter where you are a generic, boring soldier man who is on a mission in the Bermuda Triangle, when all of a sudden something strange happens and you're teleported to a mysterious land that is filled with, wouldn't you know it, dinosaurs. Luckily, this sort of thing has been going on for a while, so you're not alone, and you find out that other people on the island, and there's even a ton of weapons all over the place and an abundance of ammo, which is handy. Early on you find a headset which still works with all the other people, some of which are the people that you're trying to find in the first place and the reason you were there at the Bermuda Triangle, and they give you some stuff to do, trying their best to guide you to them through the savage land. Now while the story is stupid, generic and predictable, it does the job in a game that is just an excuse to throw you against hundreds of dinosaurs, and as someone that still loves dinosaurs, I don't mind that at all. The levels here are all pretty linear and exactly what you'd expect. You've got jungles, caves, volcanoes, and then some more jungles. Your objectives are rarely anything other than get to the end of the level, but to do that you'll need to fight off waves of dinosaurs and sometimes even do things like finding a bomb to blow up a wall, which is always conveniently about 10 meters away from said wall, but that's alright. You get a few weapons. There's a pistol, an automatic rapid fire pistol, a Tommy gun, assault rifle, shotgun, sniper rifle, and a crossbow that fires dynamite. You also get grenades that you can throw at any point with the press of a button. And there is actually a half decent variety of dinosaurs. There's small ones that jump at you, velociraptors of course, which is mostly what you'll be fighting, as well as T-Rexes, Spinosaurus, Dilophosaurus, and even some giant scorpions, and there's even some flying ones in some of the levels. So actually there's not loads, but it's enough. The actual shooting isn't as precise as you'd like, but it works fine, and you can aim down the sights for more accuracy. But a lot of the time it's hard to know if you're hitting enemies. The game needed more blood or reactions from the dinosaurs to really let you know they're being hit, but I didn't have that much trouble putting them down. In the levels you get a few wave shooter sections as well. These are right out of zombie mode from Call of Duty, where dinos will be attacking your little base and you've got to repair windows and cages to stop them from getting in. It seems a bit daft, but it's kind of fun, and in a game about dinosaurs I don't really care about realism. These sections do get used a fair bit though, and can drag on a bit. Well, I guess they don't drag on too much, as the game can be beaten in under 2 hours. The graphics are fine, it's clearly a budget title, but the dinos are good enough and some of the animations are really cool. I can imagine that reviews of this were pretty bad, and there's even ports to the Wii and PS3. I would love to try the PS3 version, but I think it only came out in America. But if you can find this cheap, or let's face it, can be bothered to download it, then I would say it's worth the 2 hours of your time that it will take to get through. What's that? You want more licensed stuff? Well, I got you, bruh, because here is Justice League Heroes. Justice League Heroes is one of those top-down RPG games that were all the rage in the 2000s. All the Marvel heroes got one with Ultimate Alliance and the X-Men Legends games, so it only made sense that the DC heroes got a turn as well. The story here is in a load of different parts, and a number of villains, including Brainiac, Queen Bee, Gorilla Grodd, Killer Frost, Doomsday, and a bunch of others that I've never heard of, are all doing their usual nefarious things, so the Justice League sets out to stop them. The first few levels sees you paired up with fixed characters, so you'll start as Batman and Superman, Zatanna and the Martian Manhunter, Flash, Green Lantern, etc., but eventually you'll be able to choose which characters you want to use in each level, though it takes a surprisingly long time to get to this point. I guess they wanted you to at least try all the characters before you just choose Batman the whole time, or Wonder Woman, depending on how much cleavage you want to be looking at. The gameplay is simple. You run around levels that are essentially just RPG dungeons. They are quite linear, though you do have a map. The levels are filled with enemies and things that you can smash. You just have to make your way through the levels until you find the boss. It is worth exploring every nook and cranny though, as you'll want to fight all the enemies so you can level your characters up. Each character levels up separately, and you can assign your skill points to various attributes, improving health, attack, regeneration, and things like that. You can also power up your special moves to make them stronger, last longer, and even unlock new ones. Most of the combat is just a case of hammering a punch button, and that does a decent enough job. There's no combos to worry about here, it is all quite basic. Holding L2 brings up your special moves, each of which is assigned to a different button, making them easy to pull off when you need to. Enemies come in the form of generic robots and grunts based on whoever the boss of that level is, and none really put up a huge challenge. And even the bosses are quite simple, usually with a shield that you have to wait to disappear before doing a quarter damage, and then they'll summon goons in, rinse and repeat. It was a bit of a shame, but it's one of those games that is strangely addictive. You get 15 characters to choose from by the end of the game, but only 2 of them are ever present on the levels, and if you're playing single player, you can switch between them at the press of a button, which is nice. If one of them falls in battle, you have to survive until you find a checkpoint, at which point they will be revived. If they go down again, you can just go back to that same checkpoint as many times as you need to. The only real downside is that they won't get experience when they're dead. The graphics here are good, but nothing out of the world. Certainly nothing bad though. It is a bit bland, especially the level design, but I do really like the cutscenes though, and Batman is voiced by Ron Perlman, which is cool. The gameplay though is quite fun. It is repetitive, yes, and I did find that after about an hour I'd probably seen everything the game was going to offer. It was just a case of repeating the motions with a different character and enemy skins. Though it is definitely fun with a second player, and you can find items in the levels that unlock new characters and costumes, which is nice. If you like superheroes, I'd say this is a fun one. You can beat it in about 5 or 6 hours, so it is a short enough game to play through on a rainy afternoon with a mate. And finally for today's licensed game extravaganza, here is James Cameron's Dark Angel, which some might say comes under D, but in all the alphabetical lists I bothered to look at, it's in J, so deal with it. This game is based on the TV show that I've never seen that stars one of the Jessicas. I'm not entirely sure which one it is, but she looks lovely. The story here is that you are Max, a genetically created super soldier with super strength, speed and agility, and you need to rescue your twin sister from an evil corporation that are making super soldiers. Now, rather than being a proper 3D action game, this game is essentially a 3D brawler like Fighting Force and games like that. It forgoes any clunky platforming or any real puzzles, and is really just an action game from start to finish. You do have a few gadgets at your disposal though, and there are quite a few stealth moves that you can use, so if you're careful you can take out enemies quietly so they don't all swarm you, which can cause problems. The actual combat is surprisingly solid, but definitely not perfect. There's a few combos that you can do with your light and hard attack buttons, and you've got jump moves and throws as well. Doing different button combinations mixes things up, and you'll also build a rage bar as you fight. Once this is maxed out, you can press and hold the attack buttons to go all fury-like. This gives you enhanced speed, attack and defense for a few seconds, and is important when you're surrounded, which can happen a lot. Thankfully, that's where your stealth comes into it, which I only figured out much later than I should have done. You can sneak around and do silent takedowns, and this is recommended for as long as you can get away with it, as dealing with 2 or 3 enemies at a time is much easier than the 7 or so that you might need to fight if you make loads of noise. Also, you tend to have a time limit when you're fighting lots of enemies and they've spotted you, and they can take a hell of a beating before they die. You do even have a few gadgets that can stun or knock out enemies from a distance. These have limited ammo but are worth using when you can, and you can pick up those little bat things that you can use to hit people in the face with. Are they called tonwas or something weird? Those are good fun to use. Other than that though, the gameplay is fairly standard. You'll fight enemies and they'll drop keys or items that you'll need to get to the next area, and then you do some more punching and kicking. But it's done well enough, and it's one of those games that isn't exactly groundbreaking, but it does what it sets out to do quite solidly, and it's just more average than anything else. But again, this is another short game, and it can be beaten in about 3 hours, and the fact that it's really cheap these days if you're going for a physical copy means that you can do a lot worse for a quick little 3-hour game. It looks fine, though Sexy Jess does look a bit wonky at times, but most of the games of this era that tried to look realistic kinda did, so that's no surprise. Still, give it a go if you're like me and can appreciate a bit of jank and games that are just sort of middle of the road. So there you go, 10 games for the PS2 starting with the letter J that you might not have given a chance before. Which one is your favourite, and what of the games should I have included? I do get a few comments saying that my choices are crap, which I don't mind, but if you do, at least let me know what games I should have included so I can go back and include them in future videos on the channel. Thanks. Anyway, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.